Now we're going to dig in a little bit to what it really takes to find, generate, and manage data. One thing that many people miss is beginning with a unique hypothesis. Lots of companies want to take the data that's easily available to them and apply machine learning to it. We call that AI something something. I want to do AI, I don't know exactly what I want to do, but this is the data I have, so I'll figure out what the application is that works to match the data. Unfortunately, everybody in the world is playing with the same publicly available data sets. So, if you're creating an AI that uses input data and training data that's available to everyone in the world, your output is not going to be valuable. It will not be differentiated. And that's why you can think of this happening in financial markets. Everybody is very excited about these AI curated ETFs and hedge funds, and it's very important that those use alternative data, because otherwise they're simply churning around and trying to create new insights out of the same data that's available to the market. And nobody's going to win playing that game. So, to do a successful ML application, you need to have a unique hypothesis or a unique decision, piece of IP, that you would like the AI to replicate. And data management is absolutely the key to artificial intelligence. The steps that are in blue here all have to do with managing your data, and each one is an important and sometimes difficult step. Sourcing the data, figuring out its strengths and weaknesses, cleaning it, creating metadata to add additional value on top of that data, connecting it to other data sources, and storing it. Once you have all of that working well, you can start designing AI. But all of the data management is typically about 80% of the timeline. And of course, once you have your ML working, you'll see the output and you'll probably realize the problems with your data. Perhaps one feature is creating an outsized result, or you've identified something that's not scaled appropriately with the rest of the data set, or you realize you need an entirely new data set to bring an insight to the machine learning. So you're going to end up repeating this process again. So just remember that data is key. Everybody always says garbage in, garbage out. What they don't realize is the difficult work that goes into turning data from garbage to gold. Data sources exist all around us, but we always have to remember to seek out those alternative and new data sources. So we've seen this with many companies we've partnered with before. They have a unique insight that they want to bring to the market in a scalable way using machine learning, but they need new data to do it. So companies have internal data, often relevant to their particular point of view. They have sales data, customer data, data on their manufacturing and employees. And then in the world, of course, there's many external data sources available to people, sometimes at a cost, but branding, social media, stock price, there's data brokers everywhere, and all of those sources of data can come together to create value. There's a lot of free data sets on the market as well. We have here a couple examples, 538 for politics, Financial Times for stock data, and you can even scrape data, which is essentially extracting pure data from websites. So there's these many different sources, but they take a little work to get them together. And remember that no data set is perfect. And lots of transformation has to happen before data is useful, and that's not the sort of activity that you can just put on the technical team. Many of these questions require business insight and knowledge to make the right decision on. So for example, if your data is missing values, you need to figure out, do we eliminate those rows? Do we fill them with zeros? Do we fill them with averages? That's something at Open Matters we've encountered a lot given the variance in financial reporting. What do we do when a company is missing key values that our artificial intelligence wants to use to determine business model? We have to identify the right process, and it's specific to our industry and to our mission. When companies have outlier values, what do? Do you exclude them? Do you smooth them? Do you correct by hand? All of these decisions require business knowledge. When there's large discrepancy between variables, so for example, we are often trying to compare companies like Ford to startups. They have very different reporting, they have very different scale in their revenue. We have to figure out how to normalize those values so that we can look at the companies across the same lens. Or irrelevant and redundant features. The features, which is the input data, The features that you put in your model are so important to determining what the output is going to look like. You want to be sure to include all the features necessary for any person to make a good decision on that key output or key decision point, but nothing redundant and nothing irrelevant that might bias the model. So all of these decisions require a collaboration between an informed business team person and a highly skilled data technology person. Then the next challenge, combining data sets. Most great AI applications use multiple data sets and put them together in a new way. So for example, with our application trying to figure out the business model of a company at Open Matters, we use the SEC data from annual reports, but we want to combine that as well with the language of investors, of CEOs, and what we see on social media. We have to figure out a way to match those two things together. So, when it comes to financial reports, we have a company name, we have a ticker, perhaps we have stock identifiers like ISIN or QSIP. That data is not associated with Twitter. So we have to find a smart and scalable way to match data from annual reports with data from Twitter or from investor reports. And finding those identifiers and creating the right matches is a real challenge. So for all of these things, you're going to need a data management specialist, because on each of these decisions there are best practices and there are best approaches that as a business leader you're not going to be aware of. Your insight will be absolutely important to this process, but you will also need a really well-informed technology specialist in data and ML to create a successful application. The next thing to think about is how to use data responsibly, and this should be front of mind for everyone given many things that are happening in the market. We have new restrictions and regulations around data compliance, for example, those of the European Union. We have ongoing security breaches with network companies. Facebook, LinkedIn, Yahoo have all been hacked, right? And the security breaches are certainly not good for brand. And then we have ethical considerations. What is a fair way to use data that reflects the thoughtfulness you want to have about your customers, your employees, and your shareholders? Balancing the needs of the company with the privacy and the want of those around us. So every company needs to have a data policy that they carefully think of that reflects the responsibility they have in owning that data. And it's important to realize as well that alternative data can be especially sensitive. Alternative data is what the company gathers through interactions with employees, with customers, with the markets, and people don't always even realize when alternative data is being collected. It's usually not intended to be used as a data source, and it has to be transformed a little bit in order to fit into our data mold. The standards of use and the rules around it are not always clear. So an organization that's gathering or purchasing and using alternative data needs to be very thoughtful and hold themselves to a high standard in order to not get in trouble for the use of that data.